Okay, so today we're going to talk about kingdom entrepreneurship mindset. Okay, let's clarify that a little bit. So we're talking specifically now, we're shifting over to the entrepreneurship mountain, and specifically, what kind of a mindset shift do we need? Or if any, maybe some people are already thinking in that way, but how does a kingdom entrepreneur think? All right. Now, there's a difference between the world's way of doing business and then there is of God's way of doing business. And so one way we're doing, helping this paradigm shift in everything we do, is we're using different terminology. So we're not using the word business, we're using the word enterprise or entrepreneurship. And that's to help us shift our mind into thinking the way God thinks, because God says, my thoughts are not your thoughts, right? So a kingdom entrepreneur mindset. We're going to talk about today. And this is not just for the people working in the entrepreneurship mountain in your Hesed kingdom. It's everybody in the kingdom, in the greater kingdom, and everybody in the individual, we're calling them Hesed kingdoms, or on the regional level. Everyone needs to be thinking like an entrepreneur. All right. It's the world that made us think like an employee, which is the opposite of an entrepreneur. All right. So the world introduced and kind of, for the masses of people, eliminated entrepreneurial thinking because they wanted to control people. They wanted people to just work in factories. This started, of course, in the Industrial Revolution. Well, actually, it started way back in the times of slavery, but it was further exacerbated with the Industrial Revolution, where big business people needed people just to work in factories. They didn't want the people to ask questions, come up with ideas. They just wanted people to keep their head down and work on assembly lines and not give them any problems. So entrepreneurial mindset or spirit has been kind of beaten out of us. I mean, sometimes literally beaten out of the masses of people. So we need to come back to entrepreneurial thinking. All right, so I looked up in the dictionary. There were two definitions. One is a person who starts a business and is willing to risk loss in order to make money. Or number two, farsightedness and innovation, right? So thinking down the road instead of just for today, and innovative, creative. That's how the dictionary defines entrepreneurs. But let's just go a little bit farther. Let's expand on this. So an entrepreneur thinks of, how can I, this to me is the greatest difference between an entrepreneur and an employee or anyone else. An entrepreneur is always thinking of multiplying, always, constantly thinking, how can I take this land and multiply it? How can I take this dollar and multiply it? How can I take my time and multiply it? In other words, be more efficient with my time. How can I take this crop and multiply it? How can I take this herd of livestock and multiply it? Right? They're always thinking of expansion and growth and multiplication, which of course is biblical, right? He says to Abraham, why expand your tent pegs, widen your tent pegs. God is always giving us land, right? He always wants us to multiply. He says, go forth and make disciples, right? He wants us to multiply the kingdom, not just with people, but with land, with money. And we're going to get into the scripture behind all this. An entrepreneur thinks about multiplication and expansion and growth. All right. An employee goes to work every day, punches in like a time clock, and does whatever work he's told to do, and then leaves at the end of the day, knowing he's going to get so many dollars in compensation for his work. And it doesn't matter whether he does a super great job or a poor job, he gets the same amount of money. Sometimes maybe he'll get a bonus if he makes the boss happy, but he's certainly not most often paid for creativity. I mean, there are some jobs that are meant to be creative, but it's within the confines of the boss. All right. So there's little incentive, there's little motivation, there's no real thought process of expansion, of growing. It's just going in, doing the work and getting a paycheck and leaving. And another difference is an employee or an entrepreneur thinks, I want to leave a legacy for my family. I want to leave, and I don't have that scripture on me, but I want to leave a legacy, an inheritance for my children. That's in Proverbs. I want to leave an inheritance behind for my children and my children's children and my children's children's children, right? Whereas an employee just wants to put food on the table this week or today, right? That's what they're most concerned with. And they don't tend to think down the road and for expanding and blessing their family. Those are some main differences. And an entrepreneur will look at, a bag of seeds and say, okay, if I plant these seeds, I'm going to keep a percentage for to feed my family, like the crops that grow from these seeds. I'm going to keep a percentage to feed my family, right? Just enough to feed my family. And then, so maybe that's, 20%. And then he says, well, then I'm going to take another, I'm going to take 50% of them, and I'm going to replant them for next year or next growth season, so that I have enough, I can expand my harvest, right? I'm going to replant some of these seeds. All right. And then he takes, maybe 10% of those seeds, and he says, I'm going to bless someone else with them. I'm going to bless my neighbor with some seeds, like 10% of my seeds, so that they can be blessed and have crops to grow. All right. And then he takes, what are we left with now? We've got 50, 60, 70, 80. So we've got 20% of the seeds left. So 20%, he says, okay, I'm going to keep, what would I do with those 20%? I would sell them for other things that were needed, equipment, buy more land. Oh yes, sell 20% of the seeds to buy more land so you can have more crops for the next growing season, right? An entrepreneur thinks this way, right? Whereas an employee tends to think, oh my goodness, we have food to eat, we're going to eat it, right? They're not thinking down the road, they're thinking for today. All right. So just some of the differences, there's lots more, but those are some of the big differences. And we need to be thinking like entrepreneurs. We are kingdom, we are to grow the kingdom. Entrepreneurs think expansion, multiplication, growth, and they're willing to take risks, and they're willing to sacrifice. Okay, well, if I have 2 meals a day, which is enough to survive on, and take the rest of my money or seeds or whatever to invest and expand, then I'm leaving a legacy. I'm planning for the future of my family. All right. So let's see here. Another thing, an entrepreneur. Now, entrepreneur specifically is thinking. We're going to zero in on specifically money. Okay, how do we multiply money? How do we generate revenue? All right, and that is biblical. We're going to come to that. We are called to generate revenue, much wealth. All right, and we'll come to that. It's biblical. But an entrepreneur seeks to increase financial empowerment, right? Money empowers people. With money, you can buy land, right? To build schools, to build kingdoms, like, right? We're building, has said, kingdoms, sustainable kingdoms to survive the times that are coming. We can't do that without money. All right. So an entrepreneur is constantly thinking financial empowerment. With money, we can buy land. With money, we can buy livestock. With money, we can buy seeds. We can buy equipment. With money, we can buy all those. Well, those are the basic necessities you need to start anyways. And you need to pay your people, right? So, so this is how an entrepreneur thinks, to increase financial empowerment. And specifically, a kingdom entrepreneur thinks, how can I increase financial empowerment for the purpose of building God's kingdom, right? Someone of the world thinks, how can I increase financial empowerment for my own status, for my own benefit, all right? But a kingdom entrepreneur thinks, how can I increase financial empowerment to build the kingdom, to empower others, all right? All right, so it is our duty to make money. It is our duty to generate revenue, and it pleases our King of Kings. It pleases our King. So I'm going to read from Matthew 25:14-30, commonly known as the parable of the talents. All right. I'm just going to read the whole scripture. It's not a long one. All right. Again, heaven's kingdom is like a wealthy man who went on a long journey and summoned all his trusted servants and assigned his financial management over to them, right? He assigned his financial management, money management over to them. Before he left on his journey, he entrusted a bag of 5,000 gold coins to, which is 5 talents in other versions, to one of his servants, and to another a bag of 2,000 gold coins or 2 talents, and to the third person a bag of 1,000 gold coins or 1 talent, each according, listen to this, each according to his ability to manage, right? So God gives us the appropriate money, because he's talking about the master, God. He gives us each according to how we're able to manage our money. All right. The one entrusted with 5,000 gold coins immediately went out and traded with the money, and he doubled his investment. In the same way, the one who was entrusted with 2,000 gold coins traded with the sum and likewise doubled his investment. But the one who had been entrusted with 1,000 gold coins dug a hole in the ground and buried his master's money. After much time had passed, the master returned to settle accounts with his servants. And the one who was entrusted with 5,000 gold coins came and brought 10,000, saying, "See, I have doubled your money." And now listen to this. This is what the master said. Commending his servant, the master replied, "You have done well and proven yourself to be my loyal and trustworthy servant. Because you have been a faithful steward to manage a small sum, now I will put you in charge of much, much more. And you will experience the delight of your master, who will say to you, 'Enter into the joy of your Lord.'" Okay. Now, I'm not going to repeat that. He said the same exact thing to the one he had given 2,000 gold coins or 2 talents to. It's just for the sake of time, we'll skip down to the one who had 1. Then the one man who had been entrusted with 1,000 gold coins came to his master and said, "Look, sir, I know that you're a hard man to please, and you're a shrewd and ruthless businessman who grows rich on the backs of others. I was afraid of you, so I went and hid your money and buried it in the ground. But here it is, take it, it's yours." But the master said to him, "You are untrustworthy and lazy servant. If you knew I was shrewd and ruthless, a shrewd and ruthless businessman who always makes a profit, why didn't you deposit my money in the bank? Then I would take the 1,000 gold coins. Then I would have received it all back with interest when I returned. But because you were unfaithful, I will take the 1,000 gold coins and give them to the one who has 10,000. And for the one who has will be given more until he overflows with abundance. And the one with hardly anything, even what little he has, will be taken from him. Then the master said to his other servants, now throw that good for nothing servant far away from me into the outer darkness, where there will be great misery and anguish. Okay, these aren't my words, guys. This is the Lord speaking, right? Because we know the Bible is God's written word, right? All right, so he's saying, when you generate wealth, when you generate money, you are loyal, you are trustworthy. And he says, I will give you much, much more. And we get to experience the delight of the master, and we enter into his joy, into his presence, because he says, come with me. We get to be in his presence when we generate revenue, multiply money. But if we're not multiplying our money, we are called untrustworthy, lazy, and good for nothing. It's pretty harsh. And we experience anything we do have gets taken away, and we experience great misery and anguish. So, guys, these are God's words. So, like I said at the beginning, we are all called to be kingdom entrepreneurs, not just certain people. We are all called to be kingdom entrepreneurs, right? This master called all three of his men to be multipliers of money or entrepreneurs. Not just one, not just two. He called all three of them to do that. All right. And we are supposed to make money to build the master's kingdom, right? Not for us. It's to provide for us. Of course, we need food, we need clothes, like that's what it's for. But it's to build his kingdom. All right. So, all right. So I want to close that off. Just wanted to establish, first of all, we're called to be kingdom entrepreneurs. We're called to multiply, including money, not just souls, right? Some people think, oh, I led 100 people to Jesus this month, I'm doing good. Well, yeah, that's all great. That's of course, that's wonderful, of course, but that's not the only way we expand the kingdom. We need money to expand the kingdom. We need money to buy land, and equipment and seeds and so on. All right, so let's move on to the next part. We've established that. Any questions, comments, on that part before we move on? All right. Okay, so now let's talk about this, because a lot of people say, well, I don't know, because it says the love of money is the root of all evil, right? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. The love of money is the root of all evil. But here's the thing. There's an expression we have here in North America called, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. In other words, so you put the baby in the bath and you rubbed all, scrubbed all the dirt off, and so the bath water is dirty. Well, you throw out the bath water that's dirty, but you don't throw out the baby. You keep the baby, right? So let's not, a lot of times that scripture of the love of money is the root of all evil, that tends to, that what that's done with the church is, it's made us, we have a discussion, dumbed us down, or it's kind of wiped out that entrepreneurial thinking. There is a difference between loving money and making money. You can make money and and it's not your idol, right? There's a difference. And we need to put that out on the table again and reverse what churches have been teaching. It's not all churches, some churches. So there's a difference between loving money and making money. There's a difference, all right? Loving money means to idolize the money itself and what it can provide. We idolize that, right? So it's what we do with that money is the difference between good and evil. That's the key. How do we manage the money? That's the key. So a kingdom entrepreneur sees that money as a tool to expand and grow the kingdom and is already thinking of, how am I going to invest? Will I buy seeds? Will I buy livestock? Will I buy more land? Do I need to, I've brought on more staff. I need to feed them, pay them, right? He's constantly thinking, how can I grow the kingdom? Whereas evil thinking would be, oh, look at all this money I got. I can buy another car. I can buy a bigger house. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a time that's coming, right? Like in King Solomon's time, he invested over and over and expanded and grew the kingdom in a methodical way, which is our blueprint God has given us, right? And when we build it his way, according to his blueprint, there will come a time where we have big homes, where we have, lots of food, everything that we need, because he calls us, John 10 and 11, to live in, well, let me just read it. I really like the Passion Translation for this one. Luke, John 10. Oh, goodness. So he says, Jesus went over it again. He says, I speak to you eternal truth. I am the gate for the flock. All who broke in before me are thieves who came to steal, but the sheep never listened to him. Now, hold on, I'm reading too fast. Okay, here we are. A thief has only one thing in mind. He wants to steal, kill, and destroy. But I have come to give you everything in abundance, more than you expect, life in its fullness until you overflow. I am the good shepherd who lays down my life as a sacrifice for the sheep. All right. So that is what God intends for us, but we have to start somewhere. And evil thinking or idolatry thinking or love of money thinking is more of, how can I bless myself with this money? Whereas a kingdom entrepreneur says, how can I reinvest this money to grow even more, to make even more for the kingdom? All right. Okay. Let's see here. Right. So he's thinking, how can I turn $10 into $100? How can I turn $100 into $1,000? How can I turn $1,000 into $10,000? How can I turn 10,000 into $1 million? How can I turn 1 million into 1 billion? And guys, we need to think on these scales, right? We need to start with the 100 or even the 10, yeah. But we need to constantly be thinking ahead to millions, billions. Like this is where we're headed. This is how God wants us to think, right? And not to think like poor people, but to think in terms of wealth. All right. So everything we put every dollar to must be able to multiply, right? Maybe it means to hire another worker. Okay. If it means to hire another worker, you're thinking, well, how am I going to multiply the money with that? I'm actually spending money on this worker. But you have to look at, if I hire the right worker, that worker is going to produce more right? Maybe it's a farmer, right? That worker will produce more crops, which means I can sell them, and his salary is only 10% of the extra crop that I can sell. That's a worthy investment. It's investing a little bit now for to reap a multiplication a few months or a year or whatever down the road. All right, that's how an entrepreneur thinks. How can I use this dollar, this $10, this $100, and make and grow more, grow the kingdom more? All right. Okay, let's talk a little bit. Any questions on anything that now on this section? Or disputes, like, hey, Kate, you're like, I think you're totally off base.
I have a question.
Yep.
Is it parents' responsibility to teach their children how to invest, how to be financially independent, and how can we do it?
Right. That is a golden question. That is such a good question. Absolutely. I love that question. That's beautiful. Okay, let's look at, the answer is yes. It is the parents' responsibilities. That's the short answer. Let's look at the Jews, and the Jews today somewhat, but mainly the ancient Jews. Well, let's look at King Solomon's kingdom, right? They were Jews. And even today, the Jewish people understand, as a people group, are by far the richest in the world. I'm not saying wealthy, because wealth includes health, relationships, and the fruit of the spirit, as well as money. But so the Jewish people, by far, of all the people groups, are the richest by far. Okay. So now let's look back in history. It's because they managed money God's way from the very beginning, right? They understood God's mindset, God's process, God's intention for money. They knew how to generate more with it. Now, today, some of those Jews have gone down an evil path. So let's talk about the World Economic Forum. Let's talk about Vanguard, BlackRock, the world banking system, all those big societies today that are they're working for Satan. They're building Satan's kingdom. They're not building God's kingdom. They're building Satan's kingdom. So they're using their knowledge of money management for evil, right? But they're following other than not edifying other people, but they know how to generate revenue. Okay. So we need to look at what are the principles that they follow, right? What are God's, and this is what we've lost, because the evil side has, how do I put it? Well, remember in schools, they started teaching no critical thinking. They needed people to work in factories. So they started educating kids, saying, just don't ask questions. It's a right answer or a wrong answer. No room for creative thinking, no room for critical thinking, no room for questioning the teacher or questioning the boss, right? And so it was literally beaten out of people to be entrepreneurial. So I'm going to come back to your question, Feiwa. People were taught to be compliant. You're a good girl. You're a good boy if you don't challenge the system, if you don't question things, right? So taught people to be compliant. And so we lost that knowledge, not the ability, but the knowledge, and maybe even the instinct to generate revenue. All right. So, and these books guys are opening up. Even for me, this is like part of what we're talking about today. They're open. God is opening those books to us again, giving us revelation of money management systems, right? And yes, the Jews taught it to their children. And here's how they taught it. They taught it by like teaching it, like speaking to them and teaching, this is how you multiply money. But they did it by experiential learning, right? Which is again, what we're doing in our Hesed kingdoms. The children learn experientially. And that means they watched their parents making money. They watched them do business. They would grow up, the mom and dad would be, in the butcher shop, or they'd be in the jewelry shop, or whatever their family business was, right? And the kids would be toddling around on the floor, even as 2 and 3 year olds, right? They would be just in the atmosphere watching their parents work, right? Listening to them talk. They absorbed this whole entrepreneurial spirit from their parents, right? That's where it starts. Now, of course, they taught it in school as well, but it starts in the home. You're absolutely right, Frehiwat. And so then, from there, I saw an interview. Actually, I shared it in the Facebook group probably a couple of weeks ago. It was a video between, who was the interviewer? Oh, goodness. I can't remember who the interviewer was, but he had on, it was Chris Valentin was interviewing a young Jewish woman, maybe in her like 30s or something like that. And he asked her questions like, how did you grow up? How did you become such a prolific entrepreneur for the kingdom? And she said, my parents talked about money constantly, but not in a bad way. It was all about building the kingdom, but they constantly talked about how they can make more money to build the kingdom. It was everyday conversation in the household. And then Chris Valentin, the interviewer, he said, that's interesting. He said, because in many, I'll speak for North American homes, we don't talk about money. It's like, no, we don't talk about paying bills. We don't talk about, how much mom and dad are making. It just was not talked about. It's just, and even my family, money was not talked about. Or, there were times like growing up, I remember, my father being stressed about money. But my father came from a more modest, family financially, where my mother came from an affluent family financially. So so she I see your hand there, Tinsei. Give me 1 second. Yeah, so in the Jewish families, they're constantly talking about money in a healthy, positive way, and how to multiply money and build the kingdom. So that's one thing. Another thing is they understand that the movement of money is critical. We must not be tight-fisted. Tight-fisted, there is actually a few scriptures about that. When we hold on tight and hoard our money, tight-fisted is hoarding. It doesn't circulate. You will not know. It will be hard to make more money. God intends, just like water, when it circulates, when water is still and stagnant, algae grows, the fish die because there's no oxygen. But if water is moving, right, there's air bubbles, the fish can live. Plants grow from that water. Algae doesn't survive because it's moving, right? Movement is key in the kingdom for everything, and particularly money. And if water is moving really fast and lots of it is moving, then it actually generates electricity, right? Which is invaluable, right? So when you have enough money moving and it's moving fast, then you actually generate more money. that is a principle of God's money management that we need to understand, right? So, for example, if let's just take this in real terms for money. Money comes in, let's say you've got $100, okay? You think, okay, well, I need to buy food for my family. Yeah, okay, buy some food. $100 wouldn't buy food, but I'll just use $100 for an example right now. You got $100, okay, you need some money for food. Pay your bills, right? Don't put off paying your bills, because then there's interest or late fees on your bills, right? Pay those bills now, right? And then invest some. How can I'm going to buy more land so I can grow more animals or grow more crops. You know what I mean? Invest for growth, right? Move the money, don't hold on to it. And also, of course, generosity. Some believe 10%. To me, 10% is a minimum that we should be investing in a neighbor, or like I'm saying here, Hesed International. And like, for example, investing in Hesed International, because then invest it somewhere where that money is going to grow even more, or the kingdom will grow. All right. And minimum 10% needs to be going for that. Okay. I think I answered your question. Oh yeah. So it was, should financial management teaching start in the home? Yes, absolutely. And the problem is, there's not enough parents that have an entrepreneurship mindset to teach it wisely. That's the problem. So now we're responsible in our Hesed kingdoms to teach it to the children, and even to the adults. I mean, we're, even to our leaders, right? We have to take up the responsibility. That's the unfortunate thing. But we can do it. That's, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is today, right? So, and how, it was your second part of your question, Freiwat. I think I just mentioned it to you. Talking about money around the kids in a healthy way, sitting them down, involving them in your family business. But of course, we're building Hesed kingdoms. Involve them in the building process. God gave us that specific instruction. Involve the children in the building process. They need to be making bricks. They need to be planting seeds. They need to be harvesting vegetables. They need to be digging wells. This is how they learn how a well works. That's a science class. Planting seeds, harvesting crops, that's science class. Building a market stand and selling those vegetables for a profit, that's math class. And entrepreneurship class. They just need to be involved, even though they're not making any decisions, but they need to be around you when you're sitting as a leadership team making your decisions. All right. Tinsei, you had your hand up. Did you have a question? So Tinsei, do you have a question? Or maybe he's not understanding me. All right. All right. Okay, we'll keep going then. Okay. So, any more questions on that? That was a brilliant question. Thanks, Freiwat. Any more questions, comments, or another way to teach kids? All right. Okay.
Kate?
Yep.
I have, hello, everyone. Hi, Kate.
Hi, Akash.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
My internet is not stable, but I will, yeah, that's, actually mine is not a question, but a comment. Entrepreneurship, you can look to some countries, in our world, they are more advanced on teaching their kids right from the beginning at KG level. I think Japan is such entrepreneurial principles. So they teach them as an early childhood level, which is very, very, very. In our case here, it was like a campaign. It was started in 2013 in Ethiopia. It was organized by UNDP and the Ethiopian government. We train thousands of the small scale, the medium and the small enterprises, or in which most of them are youngsters, very young entrepreneurs. So they are all over, especially the main cities. So I see a big change on that because I was involved as a national trainer on that process. It helps very, very, because the business people will do business based on knowledge and skill, so that they can, understand. But also, I'm thinking even the church community has to buy this idea. The church community. I remember I was contacting many church leaders. Come on, guys, there is a lot of movement here in Addis, and many are trained. There is no wrong to be a business person. I mean, try to convince some of them, but still not enough awareness in church communities, which is very, very sad. So we have to do on community-based communities. She has a big school. Maybe, who knows, she can start on basic entrepreneurship skills right from the kindergarten, and also spread it, the others can buy it.
Yeah.
So it's very, very critical.
Yeah.
We have to start in any way at school, in the community level, and also at national level. Yeah, I think it will help. It will be applicable, I guess, for all Africa and the world.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, great points, Assefash. I'm glad things are moving along in Ethiopia. That's really good news. In response to you're absolutely right. What I see now is the church actually teaches a poverty mindset, and I'm not. I feel very. I know that's a bold statement, but it's absolutely true. The church is teaching poverty to its people. I would not attend any church that teaches any doctrine that doesn't promote. I'm not talking prosperity gospel, because prosperity gospel misses the mark as well, right? There are some good points to it, but there's some not godly points to it as well. But again, we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We keep the good stuff and we get rid of the bad. So I would not expose I don't watch television, right? Because television promotes the world's way. It promotes violence. Demonic principalities can come in through the television. It's depressing. I don't watch television. There's a lot of things I don't, we don't drink wine to excess. Like we might have a glass of wine, but we know that when we drink lots of wine, our mind is susceptible and open to evil. So we just don't do it. I stay out of churches that promote the poverty gospel. I just don't, and I definitely would not expose my kids to it. We need to and I know actually in North America now, churches are closing every week. Churches are closing their doors because people are waking up and seeing, wait a second, this is not complete biblical. What you're teaching is not completely biblical. So yeah, I have a lot of things to say about that, but you're right. The church is teaching poverty. Yeah, and you're right, Frehiwat, at your school, like, teaching, like even, adding farming, you're not just, growing food to eat and to sell and make money, but the kids are actually learning in the farming process. Like that's becomes part of their schooling. And the best way to learn is experientially, meaning you learn by doing it, by being in it, by seeing it happening around you. That is the best way to learn. Sitting in a classroom is the worst way to learn. That's why the world set up classrooms like this. In ancient ways, like in King Solomon's time, in the Jewish way, was they walked with the parents. They learned the family business. They went to the uncle and aunts and learned their family business. They learned by doing. They would sit. A rabbi would sit, a wise rabbi, and the parents would choose which rabbi to listen to. And the children would sit around at his feet and listen, right? There were no desks lined up in a row, right? It was very interactive, very relational, very situational. That's how children were taught. And that's for our Hesed kingdoms, that's what our education model is. It's relational, right? It's the teacher talking with the students, not standing at the front dictating. But it's relational, it's experiential. They're getting their hands into the dirt, their hands on the money, their hands are weaving and sewing and knitting. That's the best way to learn. All right, let's continue on. Okay, so now let's move to the section of so what does it actually look like? So I have 9 practical ways an entrepreneur mindset is implemented in our Hesed kingdoms. Okay, so here's the first one. And I'm going to start with a heavy hitter that people are going to go say, what? I don't understand. But here's the thing. Everyone within the kingdom, the Hesed kingdom, is an entrepreneur. We've established that. Okay. Everyone is created to generate money, multiply money. All right. Now, in a Hesed kingdom, everyone is paid the same, from the leader, the king and queen, to the person who spreads the manure, the compost and manure on the fields. Everyone's paid the same. And the reason why is, one, everyone's value is the same, right? God values the king as much as he values the person who spreads the compost and the manure on the fields. He values us all the same. Our work is equally valuable, right? The person who spreads the manure and the compost on the field, if he didn't do that, the crops would not be as healthy, as abundant, right? As flavorful, as big, right? But if the king wasn't there organizing and making decisions, it says without vision, the people die, right? When things are not in order, chaos comes. Both of their jobs are equally important. So they're paid the same. All right. And if we look at the parable of the workers in the field, Matthew 21-16, I'm just going to read the last bit. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it says, so if you'll remember, the master had a vineyard, and he went to town, picked up some workers to bring them out to harvest the grapes and process them. And then he noticed, I need more workers. So he went back to town, got more workers and brought them, and they started working halfway through the day. And then he went back to town and got more workers and brought them, and it was near the end of the day. But then he says, this is where it picks up now. So then one of the workers who had been there first noticed the master was giving every worker the same amount of pay, right? Even the ones that showed up at the end. They're all getting the same amount of pay. So one worker said, hey, what's up with that? That's not fair. I've been here working since the beginning of the day. All right, so this is where it picks up. But the master answered one of them, I am not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous? That's the key phrase. So the last will be first and the first will be last. What this means is, it's the master's money. It's our master's money. Whatever money we have in our pocket, in our wallet, in our treasury, in our bank account, it's his, right? And he wants to be generous. He says we are all equal, all right? So let's say we've had, so we have the king and the queen, obviously have started this kingdom, and then they've got some people living in the kingdom and working, and then some new people come in. Everyone is paid the same, even the ones that just come in, all right? That's the way God manages money, right? And it's kind of like, this doesn't seem fair, this doesn't seem right. But that's because we've been immersed in the world's way of thinking, right? Remember, we just talked about what do we teach these kids? How do we teach these kids God's way of managing money? Well, first of all, we need to learn it ourselves, right? And again, God is opening the books right now. We're all learning. But God says the first will be last and the last will be first. Everyone gets paid the same. All right. So that's an entrepreneurship, kingdom entrepreneurship mindset. All right. Now, so let's break this down. What does this look like? You might want to get, well, maybe I can do this on the whiteboard. Let me just try. Let's see. Where's the whiteboard? Whiteboards. New one. Okay. So, let's see here. I'm gonna, what is this? Pages, text. Okay, so let's say the total profits for this particular kingdom is $1 million. Okay, so we have $1 million of profit, or we call this gross profit. Hold on. There we go. All right. So $1 million gross profit. This is the revenues that have come in. All right. Well, now, first of all, you've got, let's say the expenses are 300,000, right? So what that means is, okay, the cost of the seed, maybe you bought more land, expenses, oh goodness, maybe you had to buy compost, maybe you had to buy, put in a new well, any expenses in doing business have to come off the top. So expenses, and you're going to subtract. Oops. Okay, 300,000. Then you have to subtract what the money you're going to spend to expand. Okay, so now you say, okay, we want to expand the kingdom. So we've made $1 million. Okay, we've paid 300,000 in our expenses, our bills. Okay, now we're going to take 300,000 of our profit, and now we're going to buy more land or more chickens or sheep or seeds or whatever. We're going to buy, we're going to expand. Okay. So this is invest to expand, right? Or multiply. All right. Then we're going to take a small portion for savings. Now, remember we talked about tight-fisted, about keep moving the money, don't hold on to it. It's okay, I believe, to keep a little bit for savings because you might need some money, you know, maybe a disaster happens, maybe a flood happens, maybe lightning strikes a tree and it falls down and it ruins one of the buildings and you've got to replace the building. You need to have a little bit of money in savings to cover that. Now, God provides, you know, for it all if something happens, but we need to be wise and have a little bit of money for emergencies. All right. So we're going to keep 10,000 for that. And that's another 10,000, which is minimal. So this is for kingdom investment. Some people might call this a tithe. Maybe I don't use that word. But this is where generosity comes in and say, okay, all right, so if this was my kingdom and I'm looking at this and I'd say, okay, so we're going to take $10,000 and I'm looking for someone to invest in. I'm looking for someone who is going to grow. If I give them 10,000, they're going to make it into 20,000 in a year or more, or sorry, 20,000 or more within a year. Right. So this is just like the parable of the talents that we did at the beginning, right? The master is looking for, he gave the 5-talent guy, the 2-talent guy, and the 1-talent guy as much as they were able to manage, right? So now me, I'd be looking, who can I invest in? How can I be like my father? And I'm looking for someone that I can invest $10,000 in and they're going to multiply the kingdom. Right? And I'm giving it to them, right? I'm not expecting a return. Maybe they will give a return. I don't know, but I'm giving it to them. This is generosity. But I'm not just going to give it away to anybody. I'm looking for someone who's going to buy land and seeds and some livestock and get another kingdom started. All right. So there's 10,000. All right. So roughly, I mean, how can I put an underline here? Can I underline that? Oh, here we are, underline. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay, pretend there's an underline there. All right, so I take the $1 million, subtract 300,000 for expenses, subtract 300,000 from invest in our own kingdom expansion, subtract 10,000 for savings, subtract 10,000 from kingdom investment, like generosity. And now that comes out to 380,000. Okay. And this then, oops. All right, so this then gets split equally between all citizens. There we go. So 380,000. I don't know how many citizens you would have. For $1 million profit, you're going to have probably quite a few citizens. So that 380,000 then gets split equally between all the citizens of the Hesed kingdom. All right. And this is how they buy clothes. This is how they, buy food and all that sort of thing. It's their, we're not going to call it a salary because that's employee thinking. We're calling this dividend. A dividend is the money that you make from an investment, right? So, yeah, so that's how that works. All right. Any questions on that? Or comments? Or like, I don't know, this seems kind of crazy. All right. Okay, so let me close that. All right, so let's move on. So that was number one, entrepreneurship principle number one. Now let's go to number two. All right, so entrepreneurship in a Hesed kingdom means to get into enterprises as God directs. Okay, so as we're considering what kind of enterprises should we get into, what should we start, and always as God directs. Okay, so for example, are we going to get into growing marijuana? No, because that causes addictions and people to be high, and they're not edified. All right. Well, I can tell you, here are the things that God has given me as part of the blueprint is particularly with farming. He says, get into sheep, vegetables, alpaca. Alpaca are kind of in the llama family, but they have wonderful wool. The quality of their wool is beautiful, very, very softer than sheep's wool, very luxurious. And alpaca are wonderful therapy animals for traumatized kids. So vegetables, sheep, alpaca. He said, Kate, your children in all the Hesed kingdoms, he said, are going to create the most beautiful, luxurious wool clothing and rugs and blankets. So they're going to be like the design is going to be so beautiful. And the colors that they're going to use natural dyes from plants. And the colors that they create with the wool fiber is so beautiful. And so that we'll sell them online all over the world, and people will pay lots of money for them. So these are specific things, businesses, enterprises that God has told us to get into. All right. Home construction with natural building products. Now I know in Africa, I think every building is built with natural building products. Not so much in North America, but he said use hemp bricks. Use timber and wood. Oh goodness, construction is not my forte, so I'm not overly familiar with this part of it. But all natural building supplies, because homes that are made of natural things, like no plastics and vinyls and petrochemical products. Because those all create fumes and vapors in the house, and it makes us unhealthy. We don't even realize it. So he said, make all of your buildings that have natural products, like cob. Cob was another one. Hemp bricks, timber. There's some other ones, adobe and that kind of stuff. Bricks made from earth. Yeah. Anyway, so and he said, what you're going to do is you're going to get so good at building with natural products, and you'll create beautiful designs for homes and buildings. You're going to get so good at it by building within your own kingdoms that the outside world, the demand for natural products is going to increase at the same time as we have developed an expertise, lots of beautiful blueprints and skills to build these homes. Then people on the outside hire us to go build buildings. And that's another enterprise, home construction with natural building supplies, because they're going to be in so much demand in a few years. This is another enterprise he's told us to get into. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. There's probably more, but gold, which we are already working on getting into buying and selling gold. All right. Okay. So principle number 2, get into enterprises only as God directs, right? Because remember, King Solomon, he created that beautiful kingdom he did because he listened to God. All right. All right. Number 3, as we're planning and expanding, all enterprises we consider getting into are for initially to supply for our own needs, and then when we get, just like with the housing, when we get good at it, then we can sell to the outside worlds. All right. So we consider that, like, so for housing, like I just said, get good at it by doing it for ourselves, and then build up expertise and skill. Then we can sell it as a product or a service. The same with wool. We'll be making our own clothing and rugs and blankets. And when we get good at it, then we can start selling to the outside world. Food and vegetables, get really good at growing it, feed our own people first, sell the excess. Here's another one. Sorry, I just remembered another one. God said, get into horses, right? Breed horses, get really good at breeding and training horses. And here's why. Because that is what is going to be used for transportation, right? Because so we know as the times we're heading into, fossil fuels will no longer be available. We won't be able to use gasoline cars. Even electric cars require fossil fuels to run. Like, they'll be gone. They're going to be gone. So what we will have gotten good at is breeding horses. And so don't just get good at breeding them, but build up a large inventory, herd, I don't know, whatever a bunch of horses is called. Make sure you have a lot of them, because increasingly they're going to be in demand. We'll have our own for our own kingdoms, but the outside world they'll be in demand, and we'll have them all ready to go. Right? That's another enterprise to get into. All right. Now, number 4. Right. As we're considering what enterprises to get into, number 4, consider the highest profit margins, right? And how, so what can we grow cheaply and sell for? So a profit margin is the difference between all of your expenses and whatever your selling price is, right? So a profit margin, let's say, like if I could sell, oh goodness, a product, product A, and it only cost, like, say I could sell it for $100, but it only cost me $10 to make or grow, right? That's a 90% profit margin. That's a good profit margin, right? Or let's say it cost me $25 to build or grow or make, and I could sell it for $100. That's a 75% profit margin. That's a good profit margin. Not as good as the 90%. Do you see what I'm saying? Now, if something costs me $80 to make or build or, grow, and I sell it for $100, well, that's only a $20% profit margin. That's not worth getting into. All right. So we consider the profit margins. And also, how can we leverage this? Right. So here's one. So at the international level, we will be getting into hemp. It'll be called Hesed hemp, because hemp can be grown in Africa. It can be grown very, very cheaply. Just need to buy the land, which is very, very cheap in most parts of Africa. And in Africa, you can grow, you have a constant, there's no winter. Well, there's winter, but it's like the growing season is all year round, right? So we can grow, I think it's 3 crops per year of hemp in Africa, and use it for hemp bricks, or ethanol for gas or for fuel for vehicles. And hemp for fiber for clothing. Oh, and also for ropes, which we're going to need, right? So this is what we're looking to get into on the international level, to be able to supply all the kingdoms, right? Because you're going to need it. So it might be expensive to start up, right? Because we need farming equipment and so on. But down the road, there's a lot of leverage, and we need it for our people. These are the things to think about. All right. Okay, number 5. Also consider what enterprises will produce products and services that will be in the highest demand. Okay. maybe not now, but into the future. Okay, number 6, each Hesed kingdom considers what they have in their hand. For example, what products are easily grown or produced based on the experience and skill level of your citizens? What is the environment, the soil quality, or particular crop or animal for a particular crop or animals? And what experience and skills do your citizens have for offering for services as well as products? So this means, for example, in Canada, we can't grow bananas. Like our climate is way too cold for bananas. Now we could grow them if we built a greenhouse, which is really expensive. Then we could grow bananas, and we can actually grow things like lemons and nuts and things like that. But without a greenhouse, we can't grow any of that stuff, right? So we're not going to grow it because it's too expensive. And our climate isn't appropriate for it. Whereas like in Africa, you guys aren't going to get into maple syrup because I don't think you have any maple trees. We have tons of maple trees, and the sap comes out and it's really sweet. And we harvest it in the spring, and it makes candy and a sweet syrup called maple syrup. Well, that's something we could get into, but you guys wouldn't get into that in Africa. So to look at what skills and experience do your people have, and what kind of soil and climate and other circumstances do you have to determine what enterprises you get into. All right, where are we? Number 7. Okay, right. Every Hesed kingdom is an ecosystem, a regenerative ecosystem. So what that means is, so an ecosystem is an ecological, like it's a life system, and where everything regenerates, right? So let's just pick the farming one. There's tons of them, but let's pick the farming one. You start by buying land, okay, but then here's where it starts. Then you buy animals, chickens, sheep, goats, and they poop on the land, right? They poop. So that's number 1. You buy the animals, then they poop, and that fertilizes the land naturally. Then more crops grow. And then that provides food for us, but also for the animals. So the animals are healthier, so they have babies and they expand. So then there's more poop generated. So then more crops grow. And that's more for food for the animals. And then the animals have babies again because they're healthy. So then there's more poop, and then more crops, more food, and You see how it goes in a cycle. It's called a regenerative ecosystem. All right. And let's say, that's just the farming one. There's, ecosystems where, depending on where you plant the trees in proximity to the homes and the buildings, they provide rain and, which waters the land, fills our wells for being able to bathe and drink, right? So planting trees is part of a regenerative ecosystem. So all that to say, when we're considering what enterprises to get into, consider the regenerative ecosystem. What is a critical piece we need next to be able to produce more? All right. So for example, Frehiwot recently planted 500 trees at her kingdom in Ethiopia. So 500 trees, right? That's going to clean the air, make the air healthy. You're in a rural area anyways, the air is clean, but that's going to generate rainfall, right? That will prepare the land for crops, right? So planting trees was something good to do. All right, let's go into number 8. Right. Always consider the end plan of all the 14 mountains, right? So when we're thinking about what enterprises to get into, we're always thinking ahead of, okay, well, we've got, I'm just going to give an example. Okay, we've got our farming mountain started. We've got our entrepreneurship mountain started. We have our discipleship mountain started. Let's say we've got our sport mountain started. Oh goodness, we've got our family mountain started. Well, now we want to get into housing. We need to build more houses, right? So when we're thinking as entrepreneurs, always be thinking, which mountain do I add next to my kingdom, right? And how can I generate revenue from it? Remember, by starting the housing mountain, you're starting to figure out how to build natural homes, build up your skill set so it can convert or transition into an enterprise a couple of years from now. All right. So always consider, what mountain do you need to add next, and how can you make a profit from it? All right. Last one, number 9. All of our enterprise transactions are about fair trade. All right. Fair and equitable value for a product or service, whether we're the buyer or the seller. Okay. So we sell products and services based on what they're worth, right? If we provide a higher quality service or product, we charge more for it. And if we're buying from someone a product or service, we pay fair price for it. We don't undercut, undermine when we're buying, right? We pay a fair price, right? Because God, even if that person isn't part of our kingdom, right? And maybe they're not even following God, but we are God's ambassadors, right? God values everyone, even that person we're buying from. Let's just say let's say he sells solar panels and we're buying solar panels from him, right? And then we pay fair price for those solar panels. We don't try to, now, if he's asking too much, then of course we say, well, we're willing to pay what they're worth, and this is what we're willing to pay. And if he says no, well, we go to somebody else. What I'm saying is, we don't try to rip anybody off for their product or their service, because God values that person too, right? Their skills and their experience are valuable. So we pay fair amount. And likewise, when we're selling, we don't do sales, right? We don't try to undercut. We sell for the value of our product or service. All right. Let's see. Yeah. So basically, the principle behind that is, in heaven, there's no winners and losers. Nobody's trying to take advantage of anybody in heaven, right? Nobody's trying to undercut anybody in heaven, right? So therefore, there's no winners or losers in trades from us on earth. All right. Okay, that's it I have for today for Kingdom Entrepreneurship Mindset. Any question or anything to add, right? Anything to add to what I've said, or comments, questions, concerns? What's on your mind?
I have a question.
Yep.
I have 2 questions actually.
Okay.
Hemp, if there is anyone who can help me understand what hemp is in the Ethiopian language, Amharic, because I don't understand, and you've mentioned it many times.
Did.
And, I don't know what hemp is. I don't know. Maybe if I Google it, maybe it'll show me a picture of it.
Sure.
But that's one thing. The other question is, I heard you mention how to avoid those materials, building materials like vinyl.
Right.
Yesterday, I went to a building material store here in California to buy flooring material for flooring, hardwood. I mean, a good one. The good hardwood is very expensive.
Yep.
So I had to buy something natural that doesn't have chemicals, but then it's not as expensive. And I decided to get ceramic. I
Mm.
hope it's different from vinyl.
Yeah.
Because I Googled it, and the salesperson, the lady was helping me also, said it doesn't have chemicals, but I wasn't 100% sure. And this is like, it's not too late for me to cancel it or to change it to something else. So I need to understand.
Yeah. It's and those are really good questions. Let's start with the natural building materials. Right now in North America, trying to find natural building materials is very, 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 very hard. And it's just really hard. And particularly in the cities, in the rural areas, not so bad. But in the cities, it's really hard. And the other problem too is in North America, there's so many building codes. Like the government implies, or puts on building inspection codes, and they have to send, like if you're going to add on to a section onto your house, you have to call the government and get permission to build. And then they insist that you have inspectors come to inspect the plumbing and the electrical and the whatevers, and it has to meet their standards. And I will explain hemp in a second, but like, for example, in Canada, I believe in the United States as well, you're not even allowed to use hemp bricks. You're not allowed to. And we'll find oftentimes the government will not approve anything that's actually good for us, because that's the world's way, right? Now, God's breaking all that down, so it's already happening. But in the meantime, we've got these governments that were, that are not going to be, that don't want us to be healthy. So I would say, particular to that specific question, ceramic, to my knowledge, ceramic tile it's kind of like good, better, best, right? So, or bad, good, better, best. Bad would be vinyl, because that's completely a petrochemical product. Laminate, maybe a little bit better. Hardwood, obviously, very good, but again, very expensive. But ceramic, to my knowledge, is very like it has a lot more natural ingredients in it, but it has a glaze, what will be a petrochemical ingredient. But there might be manufacturers of ceramic tile that have really gotten good at creating 100% natural ceramic tiles. That's quite likely. Yeah, other ideas, like, I mean, if you're in the city, but things like raw wood floors, like we call it plank flooring, like where you get like long planks of wood and you lay them in strips, and then you sand them down nice and smooth and maybe put a wax on them or something like that. That's like really pure natural. There's other things like what's it called? It's like where you put down, it's kind of like a clay, like maybe adobe or a clay or some sort like that, and then you make it really smooth and then put a like a natural wax finish or something on it. That works too. Yeah, but again, in North America, it's hard. I think in Africa, it's very commonplace. I from what I'm seeing. But anyway, so to your hemp question, okay, hemp is a plant. It's in the cannabis family, right? So cannabis and hemp are the same plant family, but hemp is different than cannabis because it's a very strong fiber, right? So the leaves and the stalk break down and provide a very strong fiber. And when you process that fiber, you can form it and press it into building bricks. They look like, there's a game called Lego in North America where the blocks click together. There's lumps at the top of the bottom brick, and then you put another brick on top, and it has the corresponding holes to match the lumps on the bottom brick, and you click them together. So you can make these hemp bricks. There's 2 ingredients, hemp, well, 3, hemp, lime, and a bit of water. And you process the hemp and you press it into a block. And for home construct or building construction, they're lightweight. So like children could lift these bricks and put up a wall. They say you can put up all the framework of the walls of a house in 1 weekend. You can have all the walls framework done just by clicking these bricks together. So they're lightweight. They insulate for warm, colder climates. They resist mildew and mold and water damage, and they resist insects, and they're fireproof. So they're brilliant, right? The other thing with hemp is you can make fiber, like for clothing. Like, so there's a way of processing the hemp and making it into, like you would process wool and you would spin it into threads and make fabric or rugs. And also you can ferment the hemp and make it into ethanol, which is an alcohol, and to fuel, you know, tractors and cars and things like that. So that's just a few of, oh, you can also, in ancient times, that's what they made rope out of. They made it out of hemp. So again, I know, Fadiwa, you don't like Facebook, but in our Facebook group, there's tons of posts on the uses of hemp and how to make a hemp rope, how to make all these things with hemp. But yeah, hope that answers your question. All right. Anybody else? All right. Awesome. All right then. Well, let's actually, Henrik, if I don't know if you're driving or not. If you're, are you driving? The reason why I was going to ask if you could close us in prayer.
Hello, Kate. Yeah, I'm driving and someone
Okay.
actually listening. Yeah.
No worries.
All
No.
right. Okay.
Yeah, no worries at all. No worries. Let me just quickly close in prayer. Well, God, we just thank you that you're starting to open the books. You're starting to open our eyes and reveal to us what kingdom entrepreneurship looks like, how to manage your money, how to manage your treasury. And you're starting to show us these ancient ways that have been long forgotten or literally and figuratively beaten out of us. So God, we just thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for your patience with us. We thank you for revealing all that we are to know about money management. We want to be like the 5-talent guy. We want to be the 10-talent guy. We want to be a 100-talent guy. We want to be a 1 million talent guy. That's what we want. And that's not just so we can have lots of money. No, it's because we want to grow your kingdom. I'm going to declare that we are all kingdom entrepreneurs. I declare this in Jesus' name. And God, we desire to grow and expand and multiply your kingdom. And we know that it takes money to do that. And so, God, we just ask for your continued patience, your continued teaching, your continued counsel in transforming us, in renewing our mind so that we think like kingdom entrepreneurs. And I bind the poverty spirit. I bind the orphan spirit in all of us in Jesus' name. And I loose a spirit of entrepreneurship, of kingdom entrepreneurship. I loose a spirit of multiplication. I loose a spirit of long-term vision. I loose the spirit of growth and wealth and expansion in Jesus' name. I break off all the shackles that poverty and orphan spirit have brought on us. I break off the shackles that the church has brought on us, or religion has brought on us. And I say, get out in Jesus' name. There is no place here anymore. And I declare we are multipliers. We are entrepreneurs, kingdom entrepreneurs. So I bless everybody with dreams and visions and thoughts, and to be able to hear from God and see what he's showing us and hear what he's saying to us about how we individually and all together, as has said, how we can grow his kingdom. I release this in Jesus' name. In Jesus' name. Amen. I'm just gonna, give me 1 second here. I keep talking about this book, Poverty, Riches, and Wealth by Chris Vallotton. I'm gonna share it once again in our Facebook group, because I have the PDF version of this book. And so I'll share that again. This is a really good, it's not very big. It's not a small, it's a very small book. This is such a good book for helping to understand the difference between poverty, riches, which means the way the world sees money, and wealth, which is the way God sees money. Because there's three. It's not just poverty and wealth, there's riches in between. So to dispel some wrong teaching and renew our minds, I will share that in our Facebook group again. Highly, like, I don't even just recommend, I wish I could say mandatory, but God doesn't say mandatory. But I highly, highly, highly recommend, if you want to become an entrepreneur, if you want to become a multiplier of God's kingdom, this is a must. This is an absolute must. So I'll share that in our Facebook group again for everybody. And there's another book, I'll share it again. It is called, I'm actually reading it right now for the second time, Money with a Mission. I will share that book again. I have the PDF version. Again, any way we can change our mindset with respect to money and money management, we need to be doing it so that we start seeing the fruit. All right. Any last questions before we go? Any last comments? All right. Okay, guys. Well, bless you. And we'll see you again. We're back now every Monday on a regular basis. As you know, we had our, oh, I'm going to actually stop recording. Don't need to put this on.